Hello, everybody, and welcome to this HotDocs webinar. Thank you for joining us. Just by way of introduction, my name's Graham Penman. I am Head of Global Services at HotDocs, and I'm joined by Nigel Richards.
Hi there, and I'm Nigel Richards, Senior Product Manager here at HotDocs. Welcome to the webinar.
Fantastic. So we are going to be looking at document compliance made easy, particularly around HotDocs and document automation this afternoon. And just as an outline of what we're going to be discussing today, first of all, look at really the cost of compliance and the cost of businesses and organizations around the world, specifically looking at the banking sector. Secondly, what are some of the document compliance issues that we help our customers with? How do we then help those customers with our technology? Nigel is going to take over and do a little bit of a demonstration, and then at the very end there's an interactive Q&A. Now, just to make everybody aware, in your GoToMeeting panel for this webinar, you can ask questions at any point, and at the end we will be answering some of those questions, and any questions we won't answer on the call or don't have time to, we will be able to then send those answers back out afterwards as well. So we really want this to be interactive as much as possible, and we will then do that Q&A. So that's kind of the rough agenda for this afternoon. But to really set the scene, I just want to put some figures up for you all to see. We did some research recently into the cost of compliance in specifically the banking sector, and some of the figures that came back are pretty staggering. We were looking into this and we see figures like 2 billion. That's the amount 5 global banks received in fines in 2014 from UK and US regulators. We look at things like 2 months it takes for 1/3 of the respondents in a survey to be onboarded due to compliance pressures. So customer engagement and customer satisfaction has taken a dip because of the increased compliance regulations and processes that need to be put in place. And again, another financial figure. Global banks report that they can spend up to £300 million per year on KYC, so know your customer, and customer due diligence. And these are just a snapshot of the overarching cost that organizations, particularly banks, have when it comes to dealing with compliance issues. But that's a kind of generalized look at compliance. But what we're really going to talk about today is compliance and documentation and how we can help you with that and some of the issues that are faced. And to kick this off, I want to pose a question, really just to get us thinking and put into the background of our minds what we're talking about today. And that question is, what is the most common process to create a document in any organization? What might that be? I'd like to suggest that in organizations both small and large, the most common way to produce a document has 3 steps, and it's very manual. It comes to be found, so find a document, rename, and then modify. The 3 steps to creating a document manually. So let's go back to that first one. What do I mean by this? So finding a document. A customer comes to me and says, I want to buy this service from you. So customer B comes to me and goes, I want this service. And I know that last week I created a document for that service that I'm going to provide to that customer, for customer A. So what I do is I go and find their document. It's very similar, so I find it, I either go to my bottom drawer and pull it out, or I go to my document management system and I find that document. I then rename it. I give the new document customer A's name on it, so it looks like it's the new customer's. But all the content at that point is still customer B's. I then start to modify. I then hack away at the document in a manual process, copying and pasting information from other documents to produce my final document for that customer. And there are lots of errors in that process. You can get errors of omission, errors of inclusion. You're starting from a compromised base for your document where errors can creep in. There's no standardization. And this is common across lots of organizations. So the questions we are posing to our customers and people looking at how they can deal with compliance in their documents are accuracy. If you can answer these questions, you're on a good footing. Do your documents contain accurate information and data? Is all the data in the right places, in the right formats? Are the customer names all spelled correctly? Address is correct? Are your documents accurate in the data that they have in them? Secondly, are your documents and templates accessible? Are they in a format that everybody can consume? It's great having all this information, it's great having all these documents, but can people have access to them and can they be consumed by the people who need them? Can you update your templates and your documents quickly in a rapidly changing market? How maintainable are they? How agile are they? If markets change so quickly, can you make sure that you can make updates or add new product lines or services according to the market demands without having to redefine your entire documentation process? Can your document creation process cope with rapid uptake or changes? So we've seen the overarching cost of compliance in organizations over the last 5 years. And due to the way in which you have to scale and maybe push out work to different providers, different business units, out to the front line, how can your process scale if it's very manual or even partially automated? And lastly, and most importantly, I think, is how do you ensure that your document content and what goes out from your organization meets regulatory mandates? So how do you make sure that the governing laws of your industry and what has to be in a document, how do you ensure, how can you say that yes, my documents do contain all the relevant information, contain all the relevant clauses that are required to meet the mandates set? So that's just a little background into kind of the questions that we're posing, and Nigel's going to show you a little bit about how we can help with that. But we need to take it back a step and go, what does HotDocs do? What is our technology? Well, our HotDocs technology is really in 2 phases. Phase 1, you create templates from which all your resulting documentation is created from. And then secondly, in phase 2, you consume that content to produce the documents. So take a content author. We provide tools to non-technical business users, those users who understand your documents and policies the best. We give them a tool that allows them to take your standard documentations in the format that they're in, typically Word documents, and turn them into intelligent document templates in Word. So it's the process of finding all the changeable pieces of information and the business rules and inserting the corresponding HotDocs instructions into the document. And then once we have that content, it gets distributed out to other systems, to end users to consume, to produce documents. So take your user, somebody, maybe a relationship manager in your organization, somebody producing documents. They then select the template, and instead of interacting with the Word document itself, they interact with a series of questions, an intelligent questionnaire presented to them in a browser, that as they answer questions, questions appear and disappear depending on how those questions have been answered. We may also pull data from other systems, so your CRM systems. We want to make sure that we're not capturing data more than once, using the one source of truth for your data within your organization to pull it into your documents. So once we've collected all the information required to produce a document, it then gets fed into our intelligent document assembly engine, and out pops a document or a suite of documents from the one set of data. And alongside this, we also capture all the data from those documents and store that separately so it can be used to produce multiple documents and reused again and pulled from other data sources or used for MI reporting, all those kind of things. So that's a very high level of how our technology works. And at this point, I'd like to just hand over to Nigel, and Nigel's going to take you through some concrete examples of this.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen, and wait, everybody can see that. Is that okay?
Yes, that's come through.
Good. Okay, so the first point is I'm going to concentrate on the document generation and then swap a little bit to how you can maintain the content, how quickly you can react to that content. And the first thing I'd like to point out is that you can see that we're accessing a web application. So no longer do your users take a Word document perhaps on a shared file drive or on their local drive and then cut and paste. It's all through a web application, your end users, centralized web application where the content is always up to date. Now you can see here, I have a list of contracts, and I've got different contracts, some are sales contracts, but I'm going to concentrate on a commercial lending contract. And you can see how I have a record up here. It's previously created. The idea being I don't want you to spend your time watching me fill in fields. So we're going to jump straight into one of those questionnaires that Graham mentioned earlier on. So there we go. So we're loading a questionnaire. So what this illustrates is that with HotDocs, the people who are producing documentation are not cutting and pasting from last year's contract or from a Word document or other document on a file share. They're creating documentation by following a structured sequence of questions in what we call a HotDocs interview. So this really mitigates the risk of non-compliant text getting into your documentation. So let's take a closer look. Within this interview, we can get a preview of the document that's just about to be produced. Now, I have to highlight at this point that this loan agreement isn't a real loan agreement. HotDocs is not a legal expert in the wording of real documents. We give our clients the technology, the ability to create their own HotDocs content. That's a very, very important distinction. You'll notice that here we have a loan agreement that has some branding in the header. Now, compliance doesn't just come from external regulatory authorities. Compliance might be marketing compliance. It could be internal policy, customer conduct, or it could be externally arising. So imagine I'm working for a lender, like many other lenders, who have more than one brand. We can fill in an interview, the first question here, prompting perhaps the relationship manager, that's who I'm pretending to be now, to say, well, which brand are you offering this product under? Let's change it to every bank. And when I load, you can see the logo has changed. Change it back. So every reference to the lender here is changing all through the document by a single click, no matter how many times that includes the branding. The same is true for things like the customer name. So ABC Corporation. If I jump here to the document preview, you can see all over the place we have ABC Corporation, ABC. Imagine you've made a mistake. There's some issue with the data and it has to be changed. Imagine how complicated and time-consuming and error-prone that would be to get your compliant documentation. Here, with HotDocs, I simply change the name of the corporation, and I reload the interview, and in fractions of a second, everywhere XYZ Corporation was, or ABC Corporation, it's now XYZ. Now that's very, very simple. By the way, these yellow highlighted fields are not part of they're just to draw your attention to where the changes have taken place. Let's take a look at some more sophisticated examples. So here we have the jurisdiction. You might be lending to parties who require, or perhaps you insist that the jurisdiction terms, the legal environment under which this loan agreement will be judged, is going to be dependent on the customer. So we'll change it to France there. So here we go, we change to France. And we can see we've put in the word France. Now, I haven't done this today, but HotDocs is fantastic even at changing the language. So if you have a compliance issue that means you have to provide documentation in the local language of your customer, HotDocs does that. We have customers today, banking customers, producing dual language documents, Arabic, English, English and Chinese. Arabic, by the way, being a right-to-left language. So let's take a look. We changed the jurisdiction. And just for illustration, I want to show you something else. Especially in banking documents, if you're dealing internationally, that is, you have to be very careful about the format of your numbers. Different countries have different requirements and different ways of representing monetary values. So here we have the currency, and here we have a number. In France, we know that they use the comma as a decimal separator, and they use spaces, for example, with a thousand separator. But that would be confusing in another environment. So let's change it back to United Kingdom and regenerate the document. Here we can see this time we're still in euros, but we've changed the decimal up. There's no longer a comma, and we've now got commas as a thousand separator. So number formats, date formats, different languages, Everything handled in a fraction of a second by simply entering a field and the document changing in the background. Now let's take a look a little bit beyond just field changes. Now here we have a single borrower. It might be the name of the document, but quite often you might have a single loan, and but there might be several different parties within that lending agreement. And so HotDocs can deal with multiples. It can deal with nested structures of corporate identities as well. But here we have an entity type. Now, watch what happens. Here, this entity type is a corporation, and perhaps there are clauses which only apply to corporations rather than individuals or partnerships. I'm going to go back to the document preview here, and down here we can see I've highlighted this corporation-specific, business-specific clause. If I go back to the interview and I change the type to, say, a limited liability company, and go back to the preview of the document, the clause has disappeared. But note, not only has the clause disappeared, but the numbering around the surrounding clauses has also changed. So HotDocs deals with the number. If you take a clause out, the numbers update. Even the cross-references update automatically if you've got cross-references to those. Imagine if a cross-reference wasn't updated and you'd taken a clause out. You'd be cross-referencing to the wrong legal clause. Very, very difficult when it comes to things like that. Now, you can imagine just how quickly we're generating documents here. So I can come out the interview, and the document's being processed, and I can download the document. Of course I can. And HotDocs, by the way, can produce multiple documents. I'll just open that, and we can just take a quick look at the document. We're opening this in Word at the moment, and I've got lots of my formatting features switched on, sorry, but you can see all the variable information. Got everything that you would normally have to cut and paste in or type in has been automatically introduced into the document. Now, HotDocs can produce Word document, and many times we were asked by our banking customers to produce PDF documents with locking so they can't be edited and so on afterwards. You have the choice. But one of the things one of the questions that Graham raised earlier on was just how easy is it to make changes. If you've got a regulatory change coming in, so one of the regulatory changes, for example, might involve the list of definitions that you have to apply at the beginning of your document here. So let's imagine, for case of argument, that a new legal requirement has come in that you have to put an extra definition at the top of your lending agreement. How would you affect that change centrally and effectively? So I'm going to swap now to the authoring environment. This is the authoring environment for creating templates. It's a desktop-based application, and the reason for that is because, by and large, 99% of the world's legal documentation, contract documentation, starts off in a word processor of some kind. I have here my main commercial loan agreement contract, but I also have here a definitions paragraph. Now, you don't have to bundle all of your clauses into one single document. You can break them out into separate Word documents. So I'm just going to load Word, and it's coming on screen now. There we go. So this is my definitions clause. Oh, so one person in charge of definitions can just be in charge here without affecting or touching the rest of the package. So we can just say, I'm not going to try and type in a legally binding piece of text here. So a new definition. So there we go. I'll put that in as is, and I'll click and save and close that. That's all it is. So I've just done that in Word. No special tools, no technical. The key thing, your policy experts, the people who understand the implications of changing the regulatory requirements of the piece of text, make those changes to the document. But how quickly is it? How easy is it to get that change out to our users? I just right-click on the commercial lending agreement, and I'm going to upload to our template management system. And here we go. It's uploading. It's packaging all those dependent clauses together. I click the upload button. Off it goes. There's my contract. Upload all those templates. It's done. Now, watch this. When I go back into my commercial lending clause, I don't have to create a new or go and search for a new template. I can reload the interview, and I can take a look instantly. And take a look here. There's the paragraph, complete with my typo, of a new definition, potentially globally. In fact, not potentially. People do this today. Our customers make changes centrally, publish them maybe test them first, obviously, like I didn't here, and those agreements are made available instantaneously to all of the people whose job it is to produce the documentation for your customers. Now, of course, just one more thing here. I was typing data into the interview. Of course, HotDocs connects to back-end systems. So one of the things you have as a compliance issue is, can you really trust that the data that's held in your management information systems or your CRM systems, your core customer data, is accurately reflected in the documentation which is signed and underpins your legal obligations out there in the field? Unless, HotDocs you can push data into HotDocs templates. You could make it impossible for the documentation to be produced unless the core data has been updated and is correct. The data you enter an interview potentially could be pushed back into your core systems so that you can have a guarantee that the details in your customer legally binding, regulatory sensitive documentation out there with your customers matches 100% the data which is in your core systems. And you can do this 10 times, perhaps even more, lots of times more efficiently than you can do if you were doing this manually with Word. We have some customers, or one in particular, who told us not so long ago that they were producing 3 instant master agreements per day. They moved to HotDocs, and now they're producing 10. And not only are they producing 10 per day, but they tell us that the number of errors is effectively reduced from about 9 or 10 per document to 0. So anyway, enough of my enthusiasm here. That concludes this very brief demo, and we're just really touching the surface of what HotDocs can provide your business in terms of compliance and accurately and efficiently generated documentation. So Graham, thanks for that opportunity. I'll hand back to you now.
Great. Thanks very much, Nigel. Just as we come out of that, remember there's a question section that you can put questions in, and myself and Nigel can answer them towards the end. So as Nigel showed, there's a huge amount of possibility in helping organizations with compliance in their documentation using HotDocs. So just to summarize, we provide technology that provides you the ability to adapt both technologically and operationally to compliance updates very, very easily. The tools in the hands of the people who can make those updates and have the authority to do so in your documentation. You can guarantee that consistency across all your documentation, no matter what the volume. So all your branding, your styling can be controlled centrally and updated very quickly. Headers and footers can be stored in separate documents, so you can apply that in one place and have that propagate throughout your template set. Again, content experts update and control templates, not IT. The amount of times that we have helped our organizations with our tool and the content experts are making the updates, whereas before there was a 2 or 3 or 4 week lead period with IT to even get resources to help update them. And then further to that, there was another 3 or 4 weeks of effort before they could go into production. So in terms of that 8-week timescale, we can offer the ability to be able to control your content by the people who are the experts in it and outside of IT. Apply universal changes in one step. Easily integrate with other systems. One thing we haven't touched on in this call is the APIs that we provide to integrate with other systems to push and pull data. Of course, we can integrate with those. Nigel's mentioned a few of them, but we have a full suite of APIs that allow us to easily integrate and embed document assembly into line of business systems. And this is one of the most important things, and Nigel talked about this a lot. Ensure document data is the one source of truth. We want to make sure that the data that goes into your documents is the data that you know to be the truth. That when you pull it out and you've got lots of different systems, that we can ensure that that data that goes in is correct and in the right format for the right place in that document. So, thank you very much for being on this webinar. We've now got time for a couple of questions. So again, if you've got any questions, please type them into the question and answer bar. But just one to kick off with, Nigel, you've explained a little bit about how there's kind of one source of truth for data. What kind of systems have HotDocs integrated with over the last while? What kind of system, PMs, document management, things like that?
Yeah, so in banking, which is one of the main areas where you have the three major drivers for documentation, you have volume, compliance, and quite often a great deal of variability between your customer documents. That's generally been speaking the lending system and the back-end customer relationship management system in the background. So the data which is in your lending workflow, your lending system, can be pushed in at the point where the documentation needs to be is requested. The lending system pushes the data into the HotDocs document generation system, but also the management information as well, so that once you've got that signed document and you know that that document is the same, is produced from the data that you've got, pushing that data into your management information systems so that the management information systems give information which 100% reflects what's in your documentation.
Great.
That's just the start. Document management is another one, of course. When the documents have been generated, push them into the document management system.
Okay, so you mentioned in there that there was a bit when the documents are signed. There's obviously quite a few signing tools on the market, DocuSign being one of them. How does that fit into the kind of document process?
Well, it does. And our professional services team are often working with our customers with digital signing technology like DocuSign. One of the key things, one of the great things about HotDocs is these digital signing systems require typically fields, digital signing fields within the content. Because we work with Word content and Word has digital signing fields built in, anything that you can do with a Word document, including digital signing or PDF, will work with HotDocs. So very frequently.
Okay, good. Well, there's no more questions just now for us to answer, but thank you very much for being on this call. We hope that it was informative and you learned a bit about what HotDocs can help you with and a bit about document compliance. If you have any further questions, please email marketing@hotdocs.co.uk and we will get back in touch. But really, thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks, Nigel, for the demonstration and your time, and we hope to speak to you all soon.
Thank you.